case anybody does miss it, so you know. And since we haven't done Zoom before, um, let me just get out of some of these things. We're going to do 3.3 and 4.1, so there are two. We'll do a break in between the two. Uh, it's not extremely long. We should be done probably around 8-ish, 8:10, something like that. So we'll be done like we would like our normal time. When I share the screen like this and I do a full share, I won't see you, like I can't see the chat. So just scream out if you have a question, or if you want anything or need anything, just do it that way. I'll see if I can leave the box on at least so I would see you. But sometimes to see the whole thing, it's easier if I just click you off. So I'll check in on you. I'll go back and forth and check in if you have questions. But if you do have a question, just shout it out. It'll be fine. So let's see. I just kept praying that it's like, please let my internet work. Please let my internet work. So okay, so if you watched last week's, that was on YouTube. It's still on YouTube. You can watch it at your own convenience. And then what will happen? The test isn't for like 2 weeks. So next week when we get together, if anybody has any questions about anything, and then I'll go over some key points out of the two lectures you watched last week to make sure everyone's on the same page. I'm also going to open on Blackboard. I don't think I opened it yet. The essay part of the test. Remember, I said the test is part essay. You get to take that part home and use your book, use the internet. You could form a study group, whatever you want. It's like 5 questions. And I'll open that up after tonight's class so you can even start it ahead of time if you want. All you have to do is bring that part back the night of the test. In class, I'll lecture first for a short period, probably for about an hour, maybe 45 minutes, give you a break, and then you'll take the multiple choice part of the test, and then I'll take the two parts together, average the grade together, and then give you your grade. Um, and if it works out well, if you really would like to know right away, I can actually grade the multiple choice part right in front of you. And if you don't mind waiting like 2 or 3 minutes, I could even grade your essays right there. And before you would leave the classroom that night, you would know your score. If you don't want to know, then you'll find out the following week. But this way, you can use your book, use your notes, use whatever you want to use means for the essays. They're very straightforward. And then the rest of the test is multiple choice. And it's mainly on 1 1 1 2 1 3 2 1 2 2 2 3 3 1 3 2 3 3, and I think I have a couple questions out of 4 1. I'll check on that and let you know for sure next week. So it's all the stuff that we've done, and then anything we do next week would not be on that next test. It would go on test number 2. Okay. You should think about starting your one-page interviews, like the section on, the 0 to 3-year-old, or maybe the 3 to 6, because we've just done that material, so it's fresh in your mind. Remember, when you set that up, you set it up how you would like to, as long as I have at least one page for each of the seven groups. You could just put at the top of the page, male, age 3. You don't have to give me a name if you don't want to. You could just, identify the group. And on the syllabus, it gives you some things to look for, but it really is up to you what you want to look for, what questions you would want. It's kind of hard to ask questions, like a baby, but you could ask the parent, to get the answers. And um, it just has to be a minimum of one page. There's no way to get this wrong other than not doing it and having at least one page. But the reason we do it is so you can like use it in the real world. You can take the information that you learned in this class and apply it to the real world. That's the purpose of it. It's 1/6 of your grade. Everyone should get an A. The only time I've ever had anyone not get an A is they didn't do it. So, eh, and it's not due until the end of the course. So, I mean, you have all the way to the end of April to do this. But if you do a little bit at a time, it's not as bad at the end of April trying to find 7 people in that particular age group. Okay, so let's get started. And then I'll answer more questions, as we go. So when we talk about, you know what, I might do it this way. This way you'll be able to see my notes also. Is that good enough for everyone? You can see it that way? Because then, remember I told you I put my notes at the bottom also, so you have all the notes. I know it's harder to take notes when you're on Zoom. So we're going to look at uh, emotions and uh, psychology of the person at infancy. We've already covered physical, we've covered cognitive, that was last week. So now we're going to do the social and psychological components of infants at this age. We do see uh, infants showing basic emotions. Some develop over time, but there's even nonverbal expression. You can tell if the infant is happy. They are able to give a smile. They can show distress. Disgust is right there, right at birth. If they don't like something, you know, you may get an occasional coo or babble in between, but for the most part, you can read those emotions. And it can be different for different cultures also. When we talk about stranger anxiety and separation anxiety, we have a couple researchers we're going to be talking about for that. But, it's not bad to have that stranger anxiety for babies. In our world today, sad but true, there are people that do human trafficking, and babies are a hot commodity. So you don't necessarily want your baby or your infant to just go to anybody. So it's okay if they're a little bit weary and they stay to whatever their secure base is. Most babies are going to grow out of that as they get older and they have a little more self-confidence in themselves. But it's okay for them to be wary of strangers at this age because, like I said, in this day and age, it's not as safe out there as it used to be. So usually the first half, they're very, very kind of shy. They just kind of stay in situations where they know. They can tell the difference between faces that they know and faces that they're not familiar with. By 6 to 8 weeks, though, like I said, they can smile. They can respond to another person. So if another person smiles at them, they will smile back. Uh, if someone makes faces, etc. By the age of 2, they can begin that process themselves. If they want to get somebody's attention and show somebody that they like them, they can purposely cause their own smile. It's not just a repetitive issue that they observed in the environment. So they're able to discriminate those different facial expressions. They also uh, can discriminate vocal expressions. We say that parents at this age tend to talk more rapidly to infants and to toddlers, and they tend to have an inflection at the end that goes up. So, do you want to eat? Something like that, where you got, and they say it very fast. That seems to get infants' attention more than if you just kind of do it in a monotone voice. Faster, it doesn't matter if it's male or female voice, we see that same pattern. And they social reference, just like we do it as an adult when we're not quite sure or we're uncertain of something. We social reference. We look to other people around us and try to get an idea. Okay, what am I supposed to be doing? What's going on? Babies do that too. So if they don't recognize something right away, they can use, if there are other people in the room, whether there are other children or if it's adults, excuse me. And again, I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I cough. They can use other people and social reference to make sure they understand what they are seeing in the other person. I think this is the probably the cutest picture in our textbook. I've always loved this picture. So this is an 18-month-old baby, and they are learning who they are. So they're looking at themselves in the mirror, saying, "Hey, this is me." They can recognize that it's them, and beginning to understand who they are. Because remember, that's all learned. Everything has to be learned, that self-identity, their gender references, their sense of self has to be learned. But I just have always thought this is the most adorable picture. So important things of the things I just said. Remember, I follow a pattern. I do a little bit of a review, and then I usually try to give a sample question for like a multiple choice question. Now, how do they form these relationships? So we're going to talk about attachment, and we're going to talk about a couple different styles. Now, the first one is Lorenz, and I'm sure you remember this somewhere from biology or maybe from Intro to Psych when we talk about imprinting. I'm sure you've heard stories of, maybe there was a mother duckling, a mother who had ducklings, and the mother got killed, by a car. And the first thing that these ducklings see that's a living thing, could be a dog, it could be a cat, it could be a person, they imprint on that particular person or animal, and they'll follow them around thinking that, hey, this is mom. So it's very, very common to happen. We do see that a lot in, you know, uh, young babies, chicks, ducks, etc. And we have, research that shows that they'll imprint on anything. So a dog, or they might even imprint on you, and they'll just follow you everywhere because they believe you're mom. So that's Lorenz's stuff. That's what we mean by imprinting. And then we have good old Freud, good old Sigmund Freud is back, and he says that this connection that infants have to the mom has to do that mom is typically the one that is feeding them, whether they're breastfeeding, whether they're pumping, or whether they're using formula. Now, more and more males are staying home and taking care of infants now, and or splitting the duties with mom. But the original research for Freud, of course, was done with mothers. At his time period, men weren't staying home taking care of the babies. John Bowlby talked about it being biological, that attachment. Mom provides safety and security. So that type of attachment with mom or whoever the caregiver is, the main caregiver, Bowlby says that that's biological. They form that attachment to that person because it gives them a secure base, a secure place to look to for safety. Okay. And before I go to Mary Answorth, that ties in if you've ever watched the videos of Harry Harlow and his rhesus monkeys, where the monkeys were separated from their moms at birth, so they never knew mom monkey. They had two surrogate monkeys in the enclosure. One was made of chicken wire that had a milk bottle attached to it, and the other one had the chicken wire covered with terry cloth, a very soft material. And they both had the same faces. Everything else was the same, except one was chicken wire with a milk bottle. The other one had soft terry cloth. And they found in all situations, these baby monkeys kept going to the, surrogate mother that had the terry cloth. May occasionally walk over and grab a sip of the milk bottle, but would go back and stay with that terry cloth mother out of like a 24-hour day, probably close to 22 to 23 hours it spent with the terry cloth mother because it didn't know any better. This is what was its secure base. It was soft, it was comforting, and that became their secure base. When the infant monkey would be scared by some really strange toy, that infant monkey always ran to the terry cloth surrogate mother and stayed there for protection. Even though it was just a wire monkey with terry cloth, the baby monkey had attached itself and felt comfortable and secure right there. And if you didn't get a chance to see that video, you can always go to YouTube and type in Harry Harlow experiment, and you'll see the actual experiment. It's about 8 minutes, 9 minutes long. So it's kind of cool to go back and watch if you haven't seen it. So let's talk about Mary Answorth. Mary Answorth in The Stranger Situation sets up patterns of attachment that we believe form our attachment for later in life. So the attachment style that you have as a child has a real strong correlation to the attachment style that these infants will have as an adult. And there are four main categories. The most predominant is going to be a secure attachment. And what happens in this setup is there was a room and it had toys, and there was a person that the child did not know, and their mom. And they did replicate this with dads and grandparents and nannies, but the original research was done with mom. And what would happen is mom would slowly walk toward the door, going to leave. And if the infant saw his mother leaving, he would go running after her. And the door closes, and mom's no longer in sight, and the infant would start to cry. You know, oh, and cry and cry and cry. And eventually they would settle down and keep waiting and keep like looking toward the door, waiting for mom to come. They kind of knew mom would come back, they just didn't know when. So mom comes back into the room, and that infant that has a secure attachment to mom would go running immediately to mom to greet her. Okay, that's a secure attachment. Most people have a secure attachment. That means somewhere in their early childhood, they bonded and have that secure feeling that this person's taking care of them. Avoidant attachment, these are children that maybe the first couple times when mom would leave, they would get upset. But then after a while, it was like, you left me. They didn't even follow mom to the door. And when mom would come back in the room, they would ignore her. It's like, you don't want to be bothered with me. You just left me. I'm going to just stay here playing. I don't care. We say that's an avoidant attachment. And it's not as many. Of course, it's about 10-15% of people have that type of attachment style. Ambivalent, these are the children that are upset, when mom leaves. Really, really, really upset. They don't want to let go of mom. They'll stay there and they'll cry and cry and cry. And then when mom comes back, they start the pattern that they're kind of avoidant. They don't want to go over, but they keep looking and then they go and then they cling. I like to call the ambivalent attachment the clingers. They just don't want to leave. They're going to stay with mom, whatever they have to do, holding onto her pants or her skirt or her arm. They want her and to make sure that she's going to be there and doesn't leave. And the last one, disorganized, disoriented, actually wasn't part of the original research. That was added on after Answorth had published her original research by her research team. And this was for the children who didn't really fit any pattern. And again, if you see down in my notes, this explains it a lot more there, so you have that. But so it was added after the fact for that small group of children that sometimes ran and wanted to be with mom and greeted mom, and then sometimes they were avoidant, and so there was just no pattern. And it was a small proportion that had that, you know, but they were there, so they felt that they needed to put a category for that. Now, what does this mean for adulthood? Children who had a secure attachment when they were a child have a very, very, very good percentage of having a secure attachment as an adult, almost to the point of like 80% if they've had a secure attachment as a child. That means they will commit to relationships. They're not afraid to get involved in a relationship with someone, whether it's romantic or whether it's just friendship. They feel comfortable that that person's not going to betray them, that they're not going to leave them, etc. Now, does that happen sometimes? People will leave them? Yes. But on the whole, if they were able to have that secure base when they were a child, they're ready and willing and able psychologically to go into a relationship when they're older. Avoiding attachment, these are the adults that have a hard time trusting people. They have a hard time making or keeping friends. Or if they are in a relationship, it's not unusual that even if it's after years and years, they back out of the relationship and they make the first move to back away because they don't want to get hurt. And they're starting to feel a little antsy. This is getting a little too serious and a little too close, and I can't handle this. I'm going to break up with this person before they can break up with me and hurt me. So people who had an avoidant attachment tend to struggle with relationships. Maybe you know somebody who's been engaged for 8 years and they've never taken the next step, and the other person might want to, but this other person who's feeling this way is like, no, no, I can't do it. I'm too afraid that you're going to hurt me. The ambivalent ones, again, these are our clingers. These are the adults that they'll go into a relationship, but they don't trust the other person fully. They're the ones that will always want to check the other person's phone. They want to know who you were talking to. They'll go through your mail. They'll follow you. Say, hey, I'm going out with the boys. Oh, okay, you go ahead and go out with the boys. Have a good time. And they will, if you're going to the bowling alley, hey, they'll show up at the bowling alley to make sure you're there, that you're not seeing somebody else. And this goes for men or women too. Um, they'll do whatever they can to keep you. They'll buy you gifts and they'll buy you presents to try to hold on to you. And to the extreme, some women that have this type of attachment believe that if they get pregnant, they can hold on to their guy. They have actually been known to poke holes in condoms in order that they might get pregnant. And the male doesn't know that they did that. So they think that this will hold this person to them. Now, it may not at all, especially if that person found out that they did that. That would probably be the the red flag, hey, I better get out of this relationship. And then disorganized again as an adult would be, you know, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. What they found, not only from Answorth's research, but let's go back to Harry Harlow. If at any time in that child's life, even if it isn't until they're like 8 or 9, they've developed a secure attachment to someone, grandma, grandpa, a coach, a teacher, a neighbor, a caregiver of some sort, mom, dad, older sister, brother, somebody, more than likely they're going to have a fairly secure attachment when they're adults. They just have to have that secure base somewhere, sometime in their life. And we found that through Harlow's experiment, and we found that through Answorth's experiment also. Okay, so again, infant attachment will have consequences for later in life, and attachment disorder can happen because of that, especially if children were in situations where they were abused or parents weren't home, they were neglectful, parents who may have been drug users and didn't have the time that should have been in relationship with their child. So the child kind of has to fend for themselves, per se. They don't get fed when they're hungry. They don't get changed when they're wet. That leads to those attachment issues when they are older. So, mothers and fathers, the attachment is there. Mothers tend to attach first only because many mothers do nurse. Therefore, they have that opportunity to do some bonding. Men can bond too. Men can still, if mom is nursing, she can pump, and dad can feed the baby with a bottle. Um, it's not, you know, just because mom's the one doing it, dad doesn't get anywhere in here. That's not true. Dad can have that same attachment, but it may take a little longer since moms are really meeting some of the needs for the child right away. They can actually become in sync. It's almost like a dance, between mom and the baby. Again, changing societal norms. We're seeing more and more men who are staying at home, raising the children, especially if both parents work. If mom is making more money and you really don't want to spend almost a whole salary putting them in daycare, especially when they're very, very young, the parents may decide, okay, one of us is going to stay at home and take care of the child, and it could be the father. We are seeing that more and more. We know parent involvement reduces depression and substance abuse, and we know a child's well-being is, a really important thing, that the children feel this warmth and this nurturing and this support and this affection, and that their needs are being met. So when they cry because they're hungry, then they get fed. If they cry because they have gas, that somebody's going to pick them up and burp them to help them get rid of that gas. If they're in pain, that somebody's going to come and take care of them when they're in pain. We know that infants react positively in the presence of other infants. They'll laugh at each other, they'll smile, they'll verbalize things, like cooing at the beginning. All babies coo, all babies babble. Even babies that are unable to speak will babble with their hands. They do a repetitive motion. So they they like others, and they do pay attention to other babies. And it's at this point that we start seeing babies show a little bit of empathy. So if the other baby who's in the room starts to cry, guess what? The baby starts to cry, tries to join in. Like, here, I'm supporting you, I'll cry too. Kind of a cool thing that happens. We do have some babies that don't show empathy, and we see that pattern in babies who were born from a mom who was taking cocaine, and crack during the pregnancy. Uh, it's part of the amygdala and the development of the amygdala. We know that's kind of the emotion center in our brain. And it's very hard to teach empathy if you don't have empathy to start. If you have some empathy, you can build on it. But if a child doesn't have that ability to start, it's really, really, really hard to try to develop that. And you almost have to set up situations and help children to understand what's that other child's going to through that. Do you feel sorry for them? And you'll actually have children that will say, no, no, I don't feel anything. They hurt themselves. Oh, well. And that can be a problem when we get to adulthood if they don't have any empathy. Uh, they don't work real well in groups, you know. So, and moving on. So our next theorist we're going to talk about is Erikson. Remember, he's the one who has the 8 stages, starting with in utero. So Erikson's stage at this point, he says that they understand about themselves and they learn about other people and their own behavior. And at first, they have to get through two crises. Okay. And remember, we said crisis in this case is not like a bomb blowing up. This is something everyone goes through according to Erikson. And it's just kind of a stage, a situation that everyone goes through. And they don't necessarily ever grow out of it. It's just something that they've learned over the years and they get better and better and better at it. So the first stage is trust versus mistrust, and that's like the first 18 months. And does that infant trust that all their needs are being met? And if it is, that's a good thing, and they come through it in a positive way. If it's not, that's something that they're going to be working on for the rest of their lives, according to Erikson. That idea of trusting someone else. The second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt, and that's about 18 months to 3 years of age. And how a parent can encourage this, so this would be a positive thing, is that they allow their children to explore. They don't always say, no, no, you can't do that. No, no, let me do that for you. No, you can't hold that sippy cup. You might spill it. Well, if you never give a child an opportunity to try to have some autonomy, to do things on their own, yes, they're going to fail. Right? We all fail at things somewhere in our life, and we learn from it. But if you don't ever let your child try, excuse me, if you don't ever let your child try to learn from it, then how are they going to grow? How are they going to learn? The rest of their lives, they're going to expect that other people are going to do things for them, and they're not going to try things. They're going to kind of stay stuck in that. As they get older, they're going to always be working on, should I try this? Oh, if I do it wrong, people will think that I'm bad or I'm horrible or I don't know what I'm doing, and then it ruins their self-esteem and if you see what I mean. So it's good that parents let children explore. Now, common sense here. You're going to put those little covers in the outlets, those little plastic plugs in your outlets, so your infant and toddler don't go run up and put anything metal and end up electrocuting themselves because they will try to put things once they get mobile and again, it's not 2 years, it's like a year and a half. They start, the terrible twos are really a terrible year and a half. Once they start moving, anything is fair game. They will put things in their ears, they'll put things up their nose, they'll put things in their mouth, they'll put things in their diapers, and they'll see stairs. So you need to make sure you child-proof your house so they can't fall and hurt themselves, because it only takes a second for you to look away for a child to find something that can hurt them. They start to crawl up on the you know, the book cabinet. And if it's not secured, they could pull the cabinet down right on top of them and cause severe injury, maybe even death. So you do want to let your children explore. Stay back a little. Just let them. If they look like they're going to harm themselves, then of course step in. But don't do every single thing for your child. It takes so long for them to break that, if they ever break that. After teaching for 18 years in a K to 8 school, you would spot those children who have pretty much not been able or allowed to do anything on their own. They are very backward, very shy, and they'll stand back and, okay, you can do it. I'll just watch you. They just don't feel comfortable. So parents do have to let their children explore. And if they go into daycare, they'll have a lot more freedom there. There'll be activities that they can do, or any type of childcare that can help build that autonomy, but it shouldn't be left to people outside of the family. People who are immediately with that child should allow the child to do some exploring. And if they do explore, don't scream at them if they did it wrong. No, you're not supposed to pour it that way. You pour it this way. Well, then why would the child want to try it again the next time if they're going to just be yelled at and screamed at? Temperament. Temperament, we get a push from nature. That means that's genetic. So let me pop off for a little bit here to talk about that. So we talked about nature, nurture before. We know it's both. So our temperament gets a push from nature. So you may be a very easy baby. You can all ask your parents if they're still living, um, was I an easy baby? And some of them will say yes, and other ones will say, no, you were rotten, and I hope you have kids just like you, depending on how, how bad you were as a baby. But temperament, you have the easygoing child, you have the slow to warm up child that is kind of they're a little backward. They may start off a little rough on the edges, but they eventually get their act together. And then you have the difficult children. I mean, these are the ones that can find a way to get into everything. They tend to be criers. They don't want to sleep all the way through the night when other babies at that age have been sleeping through the night. It's that type of reaction. So let me go back to the share here. So, um, how the child behaves, what we see, how they experience other people, it will stable out once they get to adolescence, which is still a long way away. How active they are, how irritable they are, how finicky they are, how miserable they can be a real challenge, especially if, and we call this the goodness to fit model, depending on what the parent's temperament is. If the parent has a temperament that's easygoing, sure, they're going to love an easygoing baby, but they're also going to have the personality that they can handle a child that's slow to warm up, and they can handle a child that's difficult without losing it. But if you have a parent that was a difficult child, it still is difficult, you know. Is it Karens and Carls, or the cute little name that people say, oh, there's a Karen, oh, there's a Carl. Um, if you have a difficult parent and you have a difficult child, that is not a good match. And it's those type of relationships, a lot of times we see the child being abused because the parent doesn't know how to handle the situation. So you kind of watch for that in any type of situation. Um, if a difficult parent has an easygoing child, not a problem, because that easygoing child's going to go with whatever. Even a slow to warm up, there might be some rough spots, but the kid will be okay. But if you have a difficult child and a difficult parent, that goodness to fit doesn't work. Okay. So that's, as you can see, the research by Thomas and Chess that was done in 84, easy temperament about 40%. Difficult children, about 10%. Slow to warm up, about 15. And then you always have that group that don't really fit in any particular category. Sometimes they're easygoing, sometimes they're difficult. That's about 35%. So we see more that aren't in any category than we see difficult and slow to warm up put together. But you should be familiar with that study. So, um, somebody in yesterday's class asked, since there's so much to read in the textbook, um, if we talk about it in class and it's on the PowerPoint in class, I would make sure you read about that in your book. You don't have to read every single page in your book because it's a really big book. But definitely, I would look up, you can look it up in the table of contents, Thomas and Chess, or you could, just look up temperament and read that section in the textbook, and that would give you enough additional material to understand this if I wasn't completely clear. Or, of course, ask me, and I'll be glad to do that. Uh, when we talk about gender differences, by the age of 3, children already have gender stereotypes, even though the parents may have done everything in their power that their child would not be stereotyped. Little girls who have to wear pink or little boys who have to wear blue. It's kind of funny because if you really go back in history, um, like in the Middle Ages, little boys wore pink, little girls wore blue. So somewhere along the line, the colors changed. But there's still many people that, if they would see a baby in blue, they're just going to make the assumption that it's a little boy. Or if you're going to a baby shower and you know that it's a boy, they tend to buy certain colors. There are more neutral colors available now. And it's almost like manufacturers of clothing are recognizing that, hey, any child can wear any color. It doesn't define who they are. So it's much more acceptable to see, a little boy or a little girl not in pink or not in blue. And if you don't know, a lot of times people will buy beige or green or yellow, or brown, or, colors that aren't very descript that would kind of stereotype that baby. Okay. Fathers tend to act, kind of interact more with sons than their daughters, and mothers tend to interact more with daughters than sons. Now, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a difference there if it's only a single parent, because the child's only going to be in relationship with, one sex or the other. So they're gaining both from that parent. So that parent's going to be mom and dad to that child. We also see that children who wear different clothes tend to play with different toys based on gender. So even society has ingrained in these children, even though they're like 3, that little boys play with action figures and little girls play with dolls. But I'm telling you, if you take off the clothes off of G.I. Joe and you take off the clothes from Ken, They're exactly the same. It's just a label. So it's a stereotype. It's much better than it was when I was a child. And I may have told you the story. And remember, I always tell stories to try to help you to remember the concept. I had a woman in my class whose son was in kindergarten and he loved to cook. And he used to play with they have the fake stoves and the little fake refrigerator and they have little bowls and spoons and that. And this kid really loved to cook. And, some of our best chefs are male chefs and many of them started young, loving to cook. So you'd want to encourage that. So she was going to buy her son one of those kitchen sets for, the holiday. And the only color that the kitchen set came in was pink. And her husband refused to buy his son a pink kitchen set. So he made the decision, even though my child loves doing this and I could encourage my child to grow in this area and play in this area, maybe concurring some sort of love that could lead to a future career. No, they can't have that. They'll have to find something else because this boy is not going to be using a pink kitchen set. And so they didn't buy it. And I said to the woman, has your son ever been, or your husband ever been to the hardware store? And she's like, well, yeah. It's like, they do make this thing called paint. Instead of, you know, denying your child something that they love to do, paint it. You want to paint it blue? Paint it blue then. Paint it white. Paint whatever color you want. But don't deny your child something that they love, that you could nurture because the color. Now, they now make those kitchen sets in almost every color imaginable, not only pink. So somewhere along the line, the manufacturer figured out, hey, we'll sell more if we make alternative colors. So, um, some differences, males tend to be more active and fussier than females. And there can be some larger differences between the genders depending on the age. And gender does influence gender roles. It's still out there. The stereotypes are still out there. They're just not as bad as they used to be, but they are still out there. And let me pop off for a second. So I don't think I shared this, but this is an example of what I mean by gender stereotypes. Back when I taught seventh and eighth grade, we didn't have enough boys for a boys basketball team. We had more girls in our seventh and eighth grade. So we had gotten permission from the WPIAL to have girls on our boys basketball team. We didn't have a girls team. We didn't have enough girls that could have a girls team, but we had a boys team that only had 4 boys, and you need 5. So they gave us permission to play 3 girls, and they were good. I mean, they were good basketball players. They were taller than the boys because, of course, girls go through the growth spurt 2 years earlier than guys. But the way people reacted to them was unbelievable. I can remember because I was the cheerleading moderator. I can remember the first time that we had 3 of our girls playing on the boys' team, and one parent from the other team in the stands stood up and just screamed at the refs saying, I'm not letting my son play with bitches. Can't make this stuff up. And everyone just kind of stopped. Like even the kids on the court. It's like, how does he know? He can't touch them. He can't do anything because they're girls. Well, they got escorted out, thank heavens. But just that whole idea that this is an adult parent saying this to children just because they were a different sex. We had teams cancel games, forfeit games, because they didn't want to play against a team that had girls on it. We had schools that said, well, we don't have facilities for girls to change, so they'll have to change in the car. So our girls had to change in the car. It, it, it was such a long year. They ended up doing very, very well. Uh, but after that year, the girls were like, we don't want to do this if it's going to be like this. So by that time, we had some more girls, and we ended up being able to start a girls' basketball team. And by the time that the sixth graders came in, the seventh graders, we then had enough boys for a boys' team. They still had permission if they wanted to play on that team, but none of those girls wanted to play on the team. It made that much of a difference. To think that the stereotype was still so strong. It's much better now. We have girls in college playing football, on a male team. The one girl who's a kicker. It's because of her talent. It's not because of her sex. Any questions so far? Okay, we have a little bit more, then we'll do our break. So let's go back to this. We don't have much longer to our break. Oh, I missed one. Sorry. Okay. So statistics, uh, and these are possibly a little more or a little less in the last couple years. So about 1/3 of families are headed by a single parent, and it might even be higher than that, maybe a little bit more. Family size has gone from 3.1 children to 2.5. And no, you don't have zero point 0.5 a child. It's an average, and it's not really that long ago when it was normal for families to have 8, 9, 10 kids. My friend Drew, his parents had 12 natural children, and they fostered 8. And one of the foster children actually died when they were very young. So they ended up with 19 children. But they had a farm, and they grew their own food, and they had cows, and they had pigs and sheep, and the kids worked the farm, and it was perfectly fine. But nowadays, you don't see too many families that have a lot of children. You'll still see some that will have like 6, maybe 7, but many families are just 1 or 2 or maybe 3 children. So that's where we get that 2.5 children. It's just an average. Adolescents giving birth has declined over the last 5 years, thank heavens. The problem is they're getting younger having birth. So prior to this research, we had a lot of young people giving birth, say 16, 17, 18. We're having less 16, 17, and 18-year-olds giving birth. We're having more 13, 14, and 15-year-old girls getting pregnant. So the shift is downward, but it is less than it was before. And hopefully that's because of education. Hopefully it's because parents are talking to their kids about sex and not just, oh no, my kid's not going to do it. So hopefully they are communicating to their children, and maybe that's why we see that. There are 96,000 teen births a year. 57% of mothers of infants work outside the home, whether they're a single parent or if it's a two-parent situation, but both parents are working. That means the child's going to be either in daycare or they have a loved one, maybe a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, somebody who's taking care of them. And we're going to talk a little bit about childcare because childcare is an important component right now. It's actually one of your essay questions having to do with childcare, so you may want to pay a little bit of attention to this or refer back to this slide when we, um, you know, get those essay questions to you. Um, 45% of children live in low income households. We have kids that go to bed hungry here in Pittsburgh. It's not some third world country. We have people whose children just have the food that they get on the table from their parents. It could be a can of green beans. Some schools give backpacks at the end of the week that are stuffed with non-perishable food that kids can take home so they have food on the weekend. And for years, up until COVID, and we got devices in the hands and internet in the hands of low income families, uh, Pittsburgh Public Schools almost never called off. They would call a 2 hour delay, but they didn't call off because they knew if they called off, the kids that only get food at school, they get the breakfast program and the lunch program for free. If there's no school, those kids don't eat. So they would really try not to. Now, because of the devices, many times they do, the online learning that doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the kid having food or not. During COVID, the Pittsburgh Public Schools paired with Eaton Park, and they provided meals, hot meals, and snacks that parents could pick up and take home. And there was enough that even if only one kid was in school, if there would have been younger kids at home, there was enough food that everyone could share the food and they wouldn't go hungry because it was for a longer period of time. 1 or 2 days, parents who are in that situation do have access to food banks and, but uh, that's an important thing that we still have a lot of kids that do go to bed hungry. And nearly two-thirds of African American children and Hispanic children in our nation, so we're not just talking in Pittsburgh here, in our nation still live in a low income home. That's getting better, but it's still out there. 80% of infants are cared for by people other than their mother in the first year. And as I said, the majority of these are in some childcare, and many start childcare before 4 months in those early formative years. And many times they're enrolled for up as much as 30 hours that they're not with their family, they're with others. So high quality childcare is really important, really, really important. Yes, it makes a difference. And yes, you do pay more for different programs. And I tell parents all the time, go see the place, talk to the people there, find out, do they have a curriculum? What's the ratio between adults and children? Like for babies, it's one adult to two infants. That's it. Because they know that they can safely watch and maintain and meet the needs of those two children. You add more babies on, then babies' needs are not being met. So you definitely want to make an appointment, go out and see what's going on. And then this is my advice. After that appointment, sometime, say in the next week or so, show up. Just show up at the facility. This way they didn't know you were coming. They couldn't just fix things up. So when you come, you're going to actually see a real life situation. This is what it's like on a normal day at this child care center. Some people do child care in their own homes. Uh, there are state licenses, or some states follow a federal guideline, but we do need to make sure if our children are going into childcare that they have a good childcare. It's not just babysitting, that something is being done with this time with these children, helping them to play, helping them to learn, helping them to grow, and especially for those young babies, that their needs are being met. So, what do you look for? Okay, are there enough providers? Is the size manageable for the group and the age? Do they comply with government regulations? Do they have a license? Ask around, ask other people, especially if you can talk to some of the parents that are in that particular childcare. Talk to the parents. So what do you like about it? What would you like to change, etc. So what are the caretakers doing during the day? Are they sitting having coffee or are they engaging with the children? Are the children safe? Is the environment clean? Okay. Do they teach basic skills? Like for hand washing, you sing happy birthday twice while you wash your hands. You just don't wash the front, you wash the back in between, under the nails. Do they teach skills like that to keep our children safe? Do they provide training for the people who are taking care of these children? Is it a happy environment? Is it cheerful? Is it fun? All of these things are so important, and these questions really do need to be asked. And again, sometimes you pay more for a child care facility that has that, but it's worth it. It's worth it if you can do it. Okay, so that is the end of that PowerPoint. So we're ready for a break. Does anybody have any questions at all? We're good? Okay, so let's take, it's 7:08. Can we do like 10 minutes? Be back on for, 7:18. You can shut your screen off and go run to the bathroom, grab a drink. If you smoke, go take a smoke, do some exercise. But I'll see you in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was enough of a break. Like I said, the next section is a little bit smaller, so it's not so bad. Let me get out of this one first. Anybody have any questions? I had my little coughing spell and I'm okay now again. So let me share. Don't get old. It's not fun getting old. Okay, 4-1. So most of the test, as I said, will be on the set of three for one, set of three for two, set of three for three. So it's those 9 PowerPoints. And then I'm pretty sure I have 2 questions out of 4.1. But I'll tell you definitely, because I have to look at the test. I haven't looked at it since I made it for the fall. So let me look at it and make sure, because I don't want you to have to study something you don't need to study if you don't have to. But let's continue on. So we're now in preschool. Woo! We're getting old real fast. So we're going to talk about how the bodies change, overall health, how the brain changes, etc. So 4-1 is physical development. And then next week we'll do the cognitive and we'll do the psychological and the social development. So of course, the body is going to change the shape of the body. It becomes longer, the length of the arms and the leg, and the head to body ratio. So the head isn't like real big anymore. It's starting to be in proportion to what the body is. And we see uh, children growing and developing just according to whatever their genetic code is at that particular time. There's a growth spurt in all children, boys and girls. And in particular, you will notice changes to the muscle size, their sense of strength increases, their bones become stronger. You need to make sure that they have a well-balanced diet. I mention this here because Physically, some children, and they should be able to have an opinion on if they like a certain food or not. But just because they don't like vegetables doesn't mean that you never give them a vegetable, you know. Um, I had a friend whose kid would only eat hot dogs. So every day she made them hot dogs. And I'm like, you can't do that, hot dogs, even if you're getting all beef hot dogs, are not all the nutrition that that child needs. So, yes, they may like hot dogs, but you have to kind of expand their nutritional meals so they can grow to the best of their ability. Um, that sense of who they are and they become more aware and more acute with their vision, their hearing, their smell, so olfactory, their sense of taste, gustatory, and their sense of feeling and touch also expands. So nutritional needs, they need less food. They don't have to eat every 2 hours. Growth will change during that time period, uh, from when they were toddlers and infants. Now they're developing more. They need more iron, less sodium. So if you look at the packages on some of our processed foods, one serving of something could be their sodium content for the entire day. Uh, so you do have to still pay attention to what foods you're feeding them, low fat foods. And um, I laugh because our food pyramid has kind of turned upside down compared to like with our new administration, more fatty foods. You don't you're not trying to fatten your child as a like you would fatten a calf. You still have to watch fat content, vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin C. Uh, you don't want some of the processed foods to be the only food. You need some natural foods. And yes, children should be given a chance to develop food preferences. I don't know about you if you have any from your childhood that maybe you still don't like. Mine was Brussels sprouts. Even to this day, the only way you're going to see me eat a Brussels sprout is maybe if you wrap it in bacon. I can remember telling my mom, they look like little heads. I I can't eat that. And my parents would laugh, but they would still make me eat at least one or two of them. So I would try it. I never grew out of that dislike of Brussels sprouts. But then they supplied me with other vegetables. I had liked broccoli and I had liked cauliflower and I even liked spinach, but I just could not do Brussels sprouts. And sometimes those old, taste will last with you for the rest of your life. And then other times you might not try something when you were a child. And then later on in life, when you're older, you'll give it a try again. And hey, you know what? This isn't too bad. I think I'll continue eating this or try eating this again. So you do have to give children the chance to have a preference, but you can't make it one-sided. If they don't like vegetables, I'm sure you've heard of V8. Well, they have V8 fruit. So it tastes like fruit juice because it has apple concentrate and peach concentrate and other things, but it has vegetables in it, but it doesn't taste like a vegetable. So if you can't get your children to eat vegetables, find an alternative way that they will eat their vegetables not knowing. Like, don't tell them that there are vegetables in there. Just be satisfied that they like that and they're still getting the nutrients then for those vegetables that they need for their growing body. At this time, children in general, most children are healthy. And the common things you typically see are colds. And especially if they're in daycare or once they begin school, things can go around school very, very quickly. And of course, they're going to bring those lovely germs home. And it may go around the whole family. And just as everyone gets over it, another round of it comes through the school. And then you bring those home again. So that's not unusual, but typically it's those minor things like a cold. You don't see the major illnesses as much occurring. Accidents, definitely, we see more. And again, we see more boys that tend to be more at risk for accidents, and boys in lower socioeconomic status areas tend to be at more risk. We talked about childproofing, that helps. And again, not exposing children to environmental toxins. So let me pop off for a second here. So, about 15 years ago, uh, a lot of parents, especially parents that don't have a lot of money or want to save a little money because you have higher utility bills at this time of year, things like that. They would go to stores like Dollar Tree, Dollar General, things like that, where they may get a lot of imports from outside the country. And they found that uh, children were being exposed to lead because you could buy those little fun tea sets and plates and things like that. And in other countries, they don't have a ban on lead in paint. So, you have these plates that you bought, nice set of plates the kids can play with, and they pretend and they have their food on the plate and they scratch their plate with the fork and they're eating and chips of the paint were rubbing off into the food, except that paint had lead in it. So they actually pulled many of those products off store shelves for a while and put out a warning to parents to realize that other countries that they may have been buying these products because they were less expensive than American made products, or even maybe America wasn't manufacturing that type of product at the time. And children were being exposed to lead. We know that lead can have consequences for brain development and may even lead to some forms of mental retardation, to mental slowing. So parents still have to be concerned. Anytime you buy anything for your child, read the label. And most products now have labels on them, even if they are from outside of the country. Read the label to see, how much of different products may be used to make that particular item. Sorry. I spoke too soon about the cough, didn't I? So, a little review again already, another review, and a sample question, and another sample short answer type question. So, you know, what are things that we understand from what we've learned that can help parents and caregivers to provide the best care for their children? And if it is something that's, um, a money issue, sometimes you just want to feed your children. So nothing against McDonald's, please. I'm not trying to diss McDonald's, but not all the foods at McDonald's are equally high in nutrition. They're high in fat, they're high in sodium. But if that's all you can afford and you don't want your kid to feel hungry, sometimes parents can buy a lot more food. McDonald's isn't as cheap as it used to be either, but they can buy more food, so they may go that route. Parents still have to do their best to try to give proper nutrition to their child. Watch their weight, make sure they're getting some exercise, get them outside doing things or activities. It works best if you can get the whole entire family to do things. So if the child has a bike. The family could go down to the trail and bike together. I always like when Pittsburgh in the summer does open streets where they block off certain sections of a neighborhood, and then they have all these activities that families can do along the route. So you kind of walk or you bike along the way, and you do these different activities, and you do it as a group, and it's a bonding activity, but it's also getting the kids outside, and it's getting them away from screens. So they're not spending as much time on screens. I was always so impressed during COVID with kindergarten teachers and teachers of first and second and third grade. Children already have less of an attention span. Look how hard it is even for us to stay on a Zoom call as adults, that we have a longer attention span uh, than children whose attention span might be 20, 25 minutes. They would have to change up activities every 20, 25 minutes to keep the children engaged. So I was always so impressed with, uh, kindergarten teachers, first, second grade teachers, versus, when I was teaching high school kids, they didn't always keep their attention either, but that was a choice that they made, uh, to maybe be doing something else, or playing a game on something else while they were supposedly listening to our class. So the brain, and again, goes back to some basic biology. Remember, there are two hemispheres connected by the corpus callosum. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. But we know the two hemispheres act in tandem. They work together. Um, each person's different. So the more you can do that brain development. Remember, when the baby's born, their brain is not done developing. Your brain doesn't stop developing. Frontal lobe doesn't stop until you're 25. Okay, so you're still developing. Uh, Providing access to good educational enrichment with children, taking an active part. Just don't plop them down on the floor with a toy and go do something else. Oh, I can go do the dishes now because they're playing. Sit down on the floor with them and play with the toy. You know, engage them in other ways. If you are watching something on TV, even if it is an educational show, then sit there with them and say, "Oh, did you see that? That's what Big Bird did. That's what the Wiggles did. That's why they're singing this song." Okay, you might hate the Barney song after a while, or maybe watching Frozen for the 87th time. You might be a little sick of it, but your kid's learning, and you can enrich that. Say, "Oh, did you see how the ice crystals are forming over here? Maybe the next time it snows, we're going to go over and we're going to collect some snow, and we're going to see if we can do something to look at the different ice crystals." So engage them in some way to help that brain lateralization occur. You don't have to memorize this one. This is just for your own benefit to look at. Different parts of the brain, again, are engaged, and we now have the technology, a PET scan, to look at that, how different parts of the brain are functioning at different times that the child is awake or at sleep. Growth spurt, again, leads to more cognitive abilities. Everything's growing as this child grows. Myelin helps with that cognitive abilities. Remember, the myelin is what helps the neurotransmitters, the transmission from the neuron, from the beginning of the neuron along the axon to the end of the neuron, like the terminal buttons. And those connections make us stronger and able to process more information. Again, you don't have to memorize the chart on brain growth. It's just there so you can see the differences in the changes for age. And just a little brief review again there. and another review one, and a sample question from that section. And many times I have the answer down there. Sometimes I don't. There's one, I can't remember if I changed it or not. There's one that's wrong. If I find out which one it is, I'll tell you next week in class which one it is. There was one that the answer was wrong. I caught it yesterday when I was looking at it, and I can't remember honestly if I changed it or not because I wasn't feeling well. I didn't stay on too long, but I will check and let you know if one of those answers is wrong. Gross motor skills versus fine motor skills. Gross motor skills, again, is going from the palming of objects where they're reaching and grabbing with their entire palm. And the fine motor skills then would be individual fingertips. They can manipulate smaller objects. And it takes practice. They may not succeed the first time. The difference between a child when they're an infant grabbing at a bowl of Cheerios and just like grabbing them and trying to push them around and throw them into their mouth, and a child being able to pick up a Cheerio and put one Cheerio or two Cheerios in their mouth at the same time. Uh, like I said, boys tend to be stronger and more active at this time period, but girls have better dexterity and coordination, and that's because of their locus of control, their center. It's much easier for them to manipulate their body without falling over than it is for young boys. And this is also the time where they learn bladder control and bowel movement, uh, getting out of that diaper and doing toilet training. You do have to teach toilet training. It just doesn't happen naturally. So um, don't force it at first. You don't want to stress the child over that, but you do want to teach toilet training. One of the things that can be used, um, a lot of little kids are afraid of that big toilet. They're small. They're afraid they're going to fall in. You can buy an apparatus that you put over the toilet seat that makes it much smaller. And you can actually buy little toilets that can be used to help for toilet training that are the perfect size. Many daycare and child care facilities, even preschool and kindergarten, have two toilets in the restroom. They have small ones and larger ones. So the children can learn to feel comfortable and safe using the toilet. To get little boys, in order to have a better aim for the toilet, you can buy these little targets. They little look like the little target symbol, and you float them in the water, and you make it a game. Like, can you hit that target? You know, so little things. Girls are a little harder to do that, because they sit down, so they're not going to miss. But little boys actually that takes practice, that takes coordination to be able to do that. Even some adults in bars, I don't know the guys if you've ever been in a bar where in their urinal they actually have a target painted on the bottom of the urinal for men to aim, so they make sure they get it in the urinal. So it isn't necessarily something that isn't used even with older individuals. And let me back up again here. And oh, and one more. Uh, Parents have to be patient with their child toilet training. There was an issue. Oh, it's probably maybe longer than when you're alive for most of you. There was a father who was really, really upset with his son. His son sat on the toilet and he just kept it, Dad, I don't have to go. I don't have to go. I don't have to go. Well, you better not wet yourself. And the child didn't go. Dad, made sure he got all dressed and everything. And the child had an accident. The little boy had an accident. And the father was so upset. And this happened right in Pittsburgh, too. He had an electric stove. and he turned the flat top of the stove on, and he took the wet diaper off of his child and put the child's buttocks right on the hot stove, caused second-degree burns all over the child's bottom and his legs. Um, and it's kind of scary. And I know that it was in the news, but I knew it was a true story because one of my friends is a pediatrician at Mercy Hospital. He does Children's Hospital, and then anytime they have burn victims, burn victims, they take them to Mercy because of the burn unit. He comes to Mercy. And I asked him one time, and he actually worked on that case. So it was, and of course that's abuse. So don't get frustrated if your child has an accident. They're going to have an accident every now and then. Same thing once they get into a bigger bed. They're not in a crib, they're in a regular bed. They may have accidents. You can buy plastic protectors for your mattress. You can put these pads like they use for older adults who have incontinence. You can put these pads down in order so if the child does have an accident, don't make a huge deal about it. It can be stressful enough, that they wake up at night and realize that they wet the bed. And that can continue. And we know that's also one of the signs if they're older and they're still wetting the bed, there is a possibility that that could be abuse, that they had been abused in some way. But it's not a guarantee, like if they wet the bed when they're 14, that, they were abused as a child. But some children just have control issues, and then you should speak to your physician, about what you can do to help them to get through this. Okay. So gross and fine motor skills are improving. Bladder and bladder control is improving. Size and their motor skills, gross motor skills, something as simple as walking steps. The way they walk steps when they're 3 is completely different how they walk steps when they're 5. At 5, they can walk down the steps alternating feet, and they don't even need to hold on. Back when you get to my age, we go back to the way that we walked down steps when we were 4, one step at a time, or having to hold on to a railing. But it's funny how we kind of reverse to some childhood tendencies when we get older. So cutting with scissors, again, you're not giving them sharp scissors, you're giving them child safety scissors. They have a kind of a rounded edge. They can cut paper. That's about it, not much more. You might be pushing it for cardboard. They're not going to work worth anything on felt. So the parent would still, if you're doing things and making things out of felt or any type of material or cloth, you would have to get the parent to cut the things because child safety scissors are not going to cut any type of material like that. And usually at this point, we see children uh, having a preference for which hand that is going to be their dominant hand. Um, and 90% of all people are right-handed. And for years and years and years in my generation, when you went to school, the teachers, if you were writing with your left hand, it was not unusual if you got a smack with a ruler across. Nope, don't use that hand. You got to use it. And they were actually forced to use their non-dominant hand. And it's not the case now. If you want to know what your dominant hand is for a child when they're young, it's hey, catch this ball when you throw a ball at them with very little warning, and whatever hand goes up tends to be the dominant hand. Some children are ambidextrous. That means they can use both hands equally as well. Uh, Children who write and learn to write with their left hand tend to have really, really nice penmanship, and they also tend to be very creative. So we see that on the psychological side. And review. sample question, sample question, and that is it. So let me stop the share. Okay, so if everyone can put on your camera for a second, please. Yay, there you are. So again, thank you. Any questions at all? We'll be meeting in person next week, and unless we get another snowmageddon, hopefully not. Um, so I'll review key things from the first three sections, but in particular, I will review some things from what you watched on the video last week, since we didn't do it live in class. So I'll probably take at least the first 10 minutes of class to do a little bit of review. So if you do have any questions, feel free, to bring them and we'll do those in class. If you have any questions now and you just don't want to answer or ask it in the group, just stay on. Once I'll stay on beyond that because I have to transfer the recording anyways to my computer, and then I will upload that recording when I'm at school tomorrow. The school internet is a heck of a lot faster than my hotspot. So if I do it here at home, it's going to take an hour to upload it to YouTube. If I do it in school, it's going to take 8 minutes. So I doubt any of you are going to be running right, to watch this lecture again right this moment. So um, next week we'll be doing then 4.2 and 4.3. We'll do the review. I will have the essay questions on Blackboard, plus I'm going to print them out. So I'll actually bring the essay questions for the first test to class, and I'll also open them on Blackboard tonight. So as soon as I get off the Zoom, I'll make sure that that's open. It's there. You just can't see them because I told you I only opened so many at a time, and I think I opened through 6 now for you. I'll check that also. So if you do like printing them out ahead of time, so when you read, you have a kind of a study guide to take notes when you're reading. Um, I will make sure it's open through 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. Uh, the there are no activities that are due yet. You should be working on your toy review. But again, it's not due yet. But we get out a little bit early tonight. You might want to pop on Amazon and see if you can find some toys you want to review. And then the game itself isn't due for many, many more weeks. But since that's something you have to make, physically make, you may want to start getting some ideas. If you have children at home, ask your child to help you make the game. They love it. And they will come up with the most ingenious games to make. Because remember, we're going to actually play your game in a later class towards the end of the course. We're going to do it actually in class. We're going to participate in your game. So you have to either make a physical game or you have to make an oral game that people would be able to participate. Give us the directions. All that is on Blackboard. That is open. There's even an example one. I have a game that I made up that you can just kind of read through to say, oh, okay, now I know what I have to do. But don't stress because that's not due for months yet. The toy review is due probably in about a month, 5 weeks. So it's labeled on the syllabus. So any questions? It was so nice to see all of you. And again, I want to apologize for being sick and having to miss tonight, but I do appreciate your patience, and snacks will be coming someday. Food works even for adults, right? It still works for adults. Is there anybody who's allergic to anything? Okay. What are you
Oh,
allergic to?
strawberries.
Okay, so I will make sure I don't bring anything that has any strawberries in it. Anybody else? Anybody peanut butter or
I'm allergic
chocolate?
to tree nuts, but I
Tree
can
nut.
have peanuts.
Okay, so I'll try to avoid nuts in general then. That would make it easier, but Good. Anybody else? Anybody a diabetic? Shouldn't bring sugar stuff. Okay. So treats will be coming. I'm not sure if it'll be next week. Maybe I'll do it the night of the test because that will give you a little sugar rush and a little energy to take the test. But thank you again. If you have any questions, just feel free to stay on. I am stopping the recording right now.